Hello everybody, welcome back to the final chapter of the Domineering CEO. This is Hua. This was a very fun short story to write. I was actually having a discussion with my husband earlier, and I asked him and I said, who do you think she would choose? And he said, I hope she chose the country friend. Well, we will see. I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy.
We were crazy in love, careless and young, but I wouldn't change it. You had me right from the start, you gave me your all, but something changed, yeah. And I sometimes drive you crazy, but I need you. Yeah, I sometimes drive you crazy, and I think that's why you've been building.
The pounding headache the following morning told Erick he had too much fun with the whiskey. He knew he would have to pay for it as he rolled to his side and groaned. It was the weekend, and usually Rylee would be over on her bike, where he would have her on the back of his motorcycle. They would make the drive to the farmer's market and buy all the freshest fruits and enjoy the day at the lake near their home. But Rylee wasn't here. He sat up and covered his head with his hands. Oh, crap. It hurt to breathe. He stood on shaky legs and walked to the bathroom. As he did, he passed his cell phone and decided to pick it up. As he opened it up, a ton of missed calls from Rylee came through. His hangover disappeared as his eyes widened and he hit the callback button. It rang a few times before she picked up. Rylee, are you okay? He cried, his heart already hurting to know he'd missed so many of her calls. I'm fine, she said, her morning voice coming through. Where were you last night? He dropped to the floor, feeling guilty. I was out with Cameron, and we had a few drinks. Oh, she said with a soft voice. What's wrong, Rylee? Talk to me. There was silence, and then he shut his eyes. I'm so sorry I missed your calls. I wasn't there for you. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. It was raining last night and thundering. I got scared. He paused, and then he let out a long breath. Was it raining last night? He was out like a light. Rylee, I'm so sorry. It's okay. Theseus was here for me. Erick's breath stopped, and he heard her continue talking about how the man had kept her company all night long. He saw red. The jealousy raged inside his soul, and he kicked the drawer beside him where it fell over. She stopped talking when the noise took over her voice. Erick, are you okay? What was that? Nothing, he muttered. I'm going to shower, Rylee. And he hung up on her for the first time. Pain struck his heart so deep that he felt the sting of tears in his eyes. Last night, while he was drowning in whiskey and drunk, she had been in someone else's arms. He was always the one to hold her to sleep through the thunder, and last night someone else had taken his job. Anger shot through him as he slammed his fist into the wall. Did you try my plan? Theseus asked as he poured coffee into his cup. He watched as Rylee stirred hers silently without looking at him. The joy he found in watching her do the smallest and simplest things in life. He woke up feeling extra good today, probably because he knew he was going to win this bet. His idea had been to call Erick multiple times last night and not leave a single message. To share with Erick about having Theseus comfort her during the storm. The way how silent she was told him that his plan had worked tremendously well. When she finally had the courage to look up at him, her eyes held a soft gaze that made his heart sink. He should be happy, but instead he found he was quite guilty when she glared at him. You're right. I heard a lot of noises around him when I mentioned about you with me. Noises? Like what kind? Like he had kicked something out of anger, she whispered. I never thought he would have feelings for me like this. He smiled. Who wouldn't? I mean, have you looked in the mirror, Rylee? I have, she said. Then why does it surprise you that Erick wouldn't want to be in love with you? She sighed and shrugged her shoulders. Because we've known each other our whole lives. We grew up together and saw each other through our odd puberty phases. I never thought he'd feel this way for me. But, she raised a finger, it doesn't yet prove anything. It just proves he's mad. Perhaps it's because he doesn't trust you. Theseus heard the motorcycle outside, and he smiled as he set his coffee cup down. As soon as he walked out the door, he saw Erick walking toward him. He heard Rylee's voice behind him, and he knew what was coming. He knew he was about to get hit. He bit down on his jaw, and sure enough, the right hook came as he expected. Rylee's voice shouting Erick's name came out shrill like a whistling teapot. She rushed over and shoved at her friend as she bent down and helped him to stand up. "Erick, what the hell are you doing?" she cried. Then she turned to him and inspected his jaw. The man had a good punch, he'd admit. He tore his tissues, and he purposely let the blood spill down his chin. "I'm okay," he whispered as she dug into her pocket and pulled out a tissue to dab at his chin. "Erick!" she screamed as she turned to him. "What are you thinking?" "What am I thinking? What are you thinking? Letting that man hold you all night long. Are you crazy? You barely know him," Erick cried. Theseus wanted to laugh as he realized how jealous this man truly was. He cleared his throat and touched her shoulder. "I'm okay, Rylee. Look, I don't know what is going on here between you two, but I'll leave you to have a moment together. I'll go in to clean up and take care of Grandma before she sees us." "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He purposely touched her hair and smiled with an agenda at her. "It's okay. I'll wait for you inside." As he strolled back toward the house, he could feel the other man's eyes kill him. Rylee shook her head in disbelief as she ran a hand through her hair. That was when she saw the bandaged hand that was now bleeding. She rushed to him. "What happened to you?" He ripped his hand from hers. "What is going on between you two?" "Nothing," she cried. "Nothing doesn't look like that," he cried as he pointed a finger to where Theseus had disappeared to. "That man has the hots for you, and he wants in your pants." Rylee shrugged. "So what if he does?" His eyes opened wide. "So what? Are you seriously hearing yourself, Rylee? Are you hearing yourself? You sound like a jealous lover." He shut his mouth and then turned away before turning back around. "I'm just worried about you, is all. He's not the right man for you. He doesn't know you. He will hurt you." "And who does know me?" she asked gently. "You?" His eyes widened and he lowered his gaze. "Why wouldn't I know you? We've been together forever." "As friends," she said. Suddenly, the more she looked at Erick's reactions, the more she believed Theseus. He did sound like a jealous lover, and one who shouldn't be saying all these words. She ran her hands through her hair, frustrated at herself for not being able to talk about what needed to be talked about. Why was this conversation so hard to say? "Erick," she said through quivering lips, "what's going on here? Why are you reacting this way?" He smiled, and then his smile faded. He took a deep breath and moved toward her until his hands reached out to hold her shoulders. His eyes almost looked black as he watched her, and she watched the courage disappear from his eyes. He dropped his hands, and she realized how hard it was for him too. It should be an easy topic to discuss, but now the space between them was entirely small, making it unbearable to breathe for either one of them. When he stepped back, Rylee took the initiative to reach out to hold him in place. He shot his eyes to look at her, and she couldn't believe she never saw this. Theseus was right. It was clear as day, right here, in this very moment, what he felt for her. "Is it true?" she whispered. "Do you love me?" His eyes filled with tears, shimmering, and he threw his arms around her, holding her close to him. She could feel his heart beating against her, and the soft whimpering from him filled her ears with an ache that he'd carried for so long. "I don't know when it happened," he began. I just love you. Entirely, deeply, and truly. Everything you do, everything you are, it is loved by me. I've just held it in me for years." She pushed him back and looked into his eyes. "Why?" Shrugging, a tear fell down his cheek. I was scared. I was scared you'd deny me and I'd never get over it. I was scared you would say no and it would change everything between us. He ran a hand through her hair gently and let out a shaky breath. Worse yet, I was afraid I could never say anything and I'd have to watch another man love you for me to see. Rylee felt Theseus' words strike her, and she didn't know what to do or say. He had been right, and now she had lost the bet. She would have to go on a date with the man who was not Erick. Before even accepting him, she would be breaking his heart. She looked up at him and took a step back. His eyes widened, and the hurt escalated to his face. Rylee? He questioned. Why now? She asked. Shrugging, he replied, Perhaps because I feel threatened, and I feel that I will lose you. So you never thought of losing me before? No, he said, irritated. That's not what I mean. What do you mean? How do I explain this to you, Rylee? I've loved you since the beginning of time, plain and simple. I want you. Every part of you, every fiber of your being, I want you to be mine. I want to do things to you. I want to know and feel it, the deepest parts of you in ways that sound sinister to the ears of priests. He reached for her and held her hands. Let me do that. Allow me in. Ask me to. Rylee felt her body shake, and she looked into his eyes that held her with love and honesty. She gave him a hug and felt his arms hold her, this time with an intimate embrace that made her body react differently. She pulled away and smiled gently at him. Give me some time, Erick. I need some time to think about this. The day had gone by without a pause, and yet Rylee felt as if it had been at a snail's pace. All day long, the only thing she thought about was Erick's confession. How in the world had she missed that? How could she be friends with him this long and not see the true way he felt for her? Perhaps she never really did see him as anything but a friend. She picked at her bandaged hand and shoved at the tears that kept coming down her cheeks. Her phone buzzed, and she took it out, seeing Cameron's name lit up. Hello? Hey, you doing anything tonight? Her friend asked. Why? Erick and I are going to go catch a movie. Double date. Bring your handsome CEO man over and we'll hang out. Handsome CEO man? How do you even know about him? Laughing, Cameron said, after Erick came back home, all he belly ached about was him. Come on, let's go catch this new flick and then we'll go have dinner. An idea came to her mind, and she agreed and hung up. As she turned to go, Theseus came walking out of the house to where she'd been sitting in the backyard. This was the most comfortable she'd seen him since she started working. Less suits and more relaxed attire, which she happened to like. I have an idea. Let's hear it, he said. My friend Cameron is asking us to double date with her and Erick tonight. Let us use this as the bet that we place together. I don't want to hurt Erick. He means too much to me. Nodding, Theseus replied, Fine by me. When they arrived at the theater, Theseus opened the door for Rylee, and as they both walked up the street to the entrance, there was Erick and the friend he'd yet to meet. After introduction, he noticed how Erick's eyes glared at him with clear hatred. The women were talking about Cameron's trip to Colorado and clearly not paying attention to the energy around them. When they bought tickets and popcorn, they walked to find their seating. As he sat down, he happened to glance toward the end of the theater. There, seated in the back row, were the same men he'd saw in the cafe the other day. They were again staring at Rylee, and he felt uneasy. He found her chatting away with Cameron, while Erick was holding a stern and angry gaze. How much time before the movie starts? Cameron asked. About 15 minutes, Rylee answered. Let's go use the girls' restroom. As they got up to go, Theseus turned to find the men in the back following their movement. This wasn't good. He suddenly reached for Rylee's hand and pulled her down into his lap where she shrieked. Erick gave them an astonished gaze as she pinched his arm. You can't hold it in? He asked. She gave him a glare that could kill. No. Fine, he said as he hooked his arms underneath her legs and stood up with her. She yelped and her arms flew around his neck. Erick shot them an annoyed gaze and Cameron chuckled. "What are you doing?" Rylee whispered. "Just play along," he whispered into her ear. He brought her like that to the restroom where both women disappeared inside. As he turned, Erick made his way toward him, his gaze dark, intoxicated with hate. "What do you think you're doing?" Erick asked as he crossed his arms. "Do you honestly think this will get her to fall in love with you?" Theseus pretended to shrug, knowing how much the man was affected by this. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" "Don't play stupid, Theseus. That's one suit you shouldn't wear. Rylee isn't that type of woman who likes big, brawly men to be all over her. She likes her men quiet and reserved." Smiling, Theseus replied, "And you should know, right? You've only been in love with her since forever." Erick's eyes widened as Theseus laughed. "Look, I don't want to pick a fight with you because I respect Rylee, but I'm here as her date. She likes me, and I like her. She's single, and so am I. What's wrong with the two of us getting together?" "What's wrong? What's wrong is that you're obviously not the right man for her. And you should know this because you're the one for her, right?" Erick walked to him and shoved at his shoulder. "You keep away from her." Rylee and Cameron came out, both women surprised to find Erick standing with Theseus. As they were lingering, Theseus noticed a group of men walk past them and out the doors. They were leaving, but they were probably going to be waiting in the parking lot. This wasn't good. They needed to leave now while it was still light out. He took Rylee's hand and hoisted her over his shoulder, walking out. As she began to shout for him to stop, both Erick and Cameron ran after them, shouting out his name. "Let her go," Erick cried. He needed to get out of there. He pulled his phone out as Rylee was shouting curse words at him. Stan picked up on the first ring. "Get the car around, now and quick." As he jammed the phone back into his pocket, the Lincoln drove by and he shoved a yapping Rylee in and pushed Cameron in after her. "What do you think you're doing?" Erick yelled. He ignored him as he tapped the car for Stan to get moving. He turned toward the parking lot and glanced around until he saw the make of the car. And then he strolled toward it as Erick continued shouting. When he reached the car, he pulled open the door and yanked the big burly man out by the collar. Erick was stunned silent as the man fell to the ground and his friends all started coming out of the car. "What is going on here?" Erick cried. "Get up," Theseus cried. He grabbed the man by the collar and pulled him up. "Who sent you?" "I don't know what you mean," the man said through clenched teeth. "Okay, I'll beat it out of you then." The first blow sent the man coughing as his buddies came at him. Theseus shoved him toward his friends and threw a few punches around. His friends dropped like flies as Erick stepped back in shock, and then he picked up the man again and placed his finger by his throat. "If you don't start talking, I'll jam my fingers right through here and you'll never know what hit you. You'll just wake up in hell." He coughed and raised his hands. Okay. Theseus released him. "Boss said he needed a new girl, so I was looking around and I saw her come in a few days ago at the cafe." "So you decided to tail her?" The man nodded. "You were tailing my woman." "I'm sorry," he cried. "I didn't know. I got it now. I'm backing off and you're never going to hear from me or the boss man again. You tell your boss man that I know where he lives. If he makes a sound, I'll rob his life while he sleeps." Yeah, sure thing. Got it, man." Theseus shoved him and he ran to gather his friends up. As they drove out of the parking lot, Erick turned toward him with wide open eyes. "What the hell was that?" he asked. If you'd paid any attention to your surroundings, you'd notice that as soon as we entered the theater room, they had their eyes set on Rylee. They were making a move to follow her. I recognized them from a few days ago when they were hanging around the cafe. Erick shut his eyes. "Oh crap, I didn't even see that." "No, all you saw was your own jealousy. If you truly love her, you will pay attention to everything that happens when she's out with you. That's how a man protects the woman he loves." Rylee felt her body detached from her soul after listening to Theseus explain what was going on. When had she failed to notice the things around her? Did she ever notice anything? Her body was shaking now, and Theseus started unbuttoning his shirt, slipping it around her shoulders as he finished talking. Both Erick and Cameron were sitting across from her, their eyes widened and in shock, the same as her. They were outside near Theseus' favorite spot, so as not to scare Brinley. Oh, God, she whispered. I'm an idiot. No, you're not, Cameron said as she came to take her hands. You're too kind is all. Rylee looked up at Theseus. Thank you. You saved my life. Be aware of your surroundings, he said. I got it from here on out. She pulled the shirt around herself and looked up at him. Thank you. Erick held a sickened gaze in his eyes as he ran a hand through his hair. She stood up and gave her two friends a reassuring look. You can both go home now. I'll be okay. I have to finish my job and then I'll be home tomorrow evening. I believe Mr. Vang will be returning home by then. Yes, my father will be back. I'll send her home tomorrow. I can pick her up, Erick said. Erick, Cameron said as he took his hand. Let's go. Take care of yourself. As Cameron led Erick to the car, Rylee turned toward Theseus and began to take the shirt off. But he reached out to stop her. Don't. Just keep it on. Are you sure you're okay? Do you need a sedative to help you sleep? Shaking her head, she said, No, I'm okay. This has never happened to me before. I sure hope it doesn't. Laughing, she replied, I meant I've never had to deal with something like this. How does one go about handling this kind of trauma? Don't let it get the better of you. Now that you are aware, just keep an eye out. I don't think they'll be back, but you need to be more cautious of where you are and who is around you. She frowned. Do you have practice in this kind of stuff? No, but I'm a businessman who takes a lot of things from people. I'm trained to look where I'm at and who's around me. If I'm close to someone who is going to harm me, I don't allow it. Like Della? Rylee asked. Laughing, Theseus replied, Della is another story. You never told me about her. She sat back down and made herself comfortable. I'm all ears now. He smiled and sat down across from her. What do you want to know? Everything, seeing as how I took a beating from her? He took a deep breath. I met her at a gala. She was strikingly beautiful in a way I had never seen before. She spoke with such grand demeanor, too. I was absolutely mesmerized by her and fell deeply in love. He stopped and looked at his hands. Then when he looked up, a sadness covered his face. But the truth was, I was just an excuse for her to get ahead in life. She lied to me about everything from day one. She lied about her status, her background, and she even stole money from me. When I found out about it, I broke everything off from her. And then the man she'd been seeing on the side broke off with her, and she came back to me demanding what she'd lost. Rylee shook her head. Wow, how degrading that is. She gives us women a bad name. Laughing, he got up and stretched. Noted. Then he got serious. Now, do you believe that Erick is in love with you? She stood up. I don't want to talk about that. Oh, avoiding the subject, I see. She threw up her hands. How is it that he can love me? I'm nobody. I'm not even all that great. Theseus came toward her and tilted her chin to look up at him. You are not giving yourself enough credit. Do you realize the power you have over a man? One look and he becomes unglued. I know exactly how Erick feels, because I felt that way from the moment I met you. She pulled away from him. Why are you telling me this? Because unlike Erick, I don't hide it when I want a woman. If I want her, I would do anything to get her. He lowered himself closer to her. Unlike Erick, if I see something I like, I chase. I chase until I have her in my arms, until I can be the only one who has the right to hold her and do what I wish with her. Unlike Erick, I won't wait until another man threatens my right to love. And unlike Erick, I'm going to do this. And he closed the distance and kissed her. Erick, Cameron said as he got out of the car. He turned around and stared at her. We need to talk. Talk about what? He asked as he leaned against the door. Talk about how you are always mooning over Rylee when she's not yours to have. Laughing, Erick said, How do you know I moon over her? It's quite obvious, Erick. I know. Because you moon over her the same way I moon over you. Erick watched as her eyes faded from a light to a darkness that made his heart ache. How had he missed this? He felt the déjà vu coming through him again. And he let out a deep breath. Cameron, my day has been hell today. I don't think I can take this right now. Yeah? But you're going to listen to me say it. She got out of the car and came around to him. I've given you several chances to see me for who I am, Erick. I'm not going to lie about it now because I see that you won't do anything about this. Do anything about what? I don't see you that way. She laughed and nodded. Exactly the same reason why Rylee will never be yours. Do you know what you're doing to yourself? You have me, this perfect, beautiful woman to love you, and you can't see anyone but her. What can I do to make you see me? Erick shook his head and planted his hands on his hips. Cameron, I hate what this is. I'm in love with Rylee, and now you're saying you're in love with me. When does this world work in my favor? Will it ever? He came to her and pulled her into his arms. I have always loved you, Cameron, but the way I love you is not what you want. I can't hurt you that way. But you're willing to be hurt that way by Rylee. How do you know she doesn't love me? He asked. She pushed back and looked up at him with sad eyes. Has she ever done anything to make you feel that she does? Has she ever been different around you? From day one, she's always just been Rylee, pure and simple, friendly and talkative, sleeping in your arms without ever really touching you. Do you think any of that will ever change? Tears filled his eyes as he backed away from her. I don't know. And I don't want to know. All I know is that I love her, and I want no one on earth besides her. But does she want you? I don't care, he cried. I want her. It's enough. Cameron nodded as a tear fell down her cheek. I hope that will be strong enough to hold you in place when she breaks your heart, Erick. Theseus stirred, and beside him, he found her sleeping like a little kitten, wrapped in his blankets. Last night had been one surprising moment when she responded to him in ways that made him come alive like he had never been before. It was supposed to be a kiss, an introduction to how he was feeling, to how they may become in the future, and it ended up with her beneath him in the quiet hours of the night. He smiled and reached out to touch her hair, pushing back a strand away from her face. She moaned quietly and her eyes fluttered open. When she saw where she was, she sat up in bed half naked and her mouth dropped. What did we do? She asked. What didn't we do? He joked. She gasped and covered her face with her hands. Oh my God, I am so ashamed of myself. He pulled her hands away and smiled at her. Why? Because you liked what I did to you last night? It's not as if I did anything against your will. You asked me and I gave you what you needed. Was I drunk? She asked, frowning. Why are you so upset? She shut her eyes and then she let out a deep breath. I'm not upset at you. I'm upset at myself. I should have controlled myself better. And right there, his grandmother opened the door to his room, and Rylee shrieked. He pulled her behind him as his grandmother's smile appeared. He felt Rylee shaking as she hid herself behind his shoulders, and he wanted to laugh. Well, his grandmother said, good morning to you both. Grandma, you did not knock. I wasn't expecting to find you in bed full today, Theseus, although I have to say I like who is in with you. Rylee said as she poked her head out from behind his shoulders. Mrs. Brinley, I'm so ashamed. Of what? Of wanting a piece of my grandson? Don't be. He's quite the catch. I'll leave you two alone. As soon as she closed the door, Rylee jumped out of bed and began pulling out clothes from the ground while muttering words. He smiled as he leaned back and watched her. He turned around and shoved her hair out of her eyes. What are you smiling about? She cried. You're wearing my clothes. She looked down and sure enough, she pulled on his pants and his sweater. She ripped everything off and began looking for her own clothes. He got up and wrapped his arms around her, catching her off guard. Don't do this, he whispered. Don't run off like a little thief. You liked what we did, all of the things we did. And you asked for a second and third. Hell, girl, you almost killed me last night. She let out a sob. I'm never like this, Theseus. I don't recognize myself. No one does when they fall for another person. She turned around and stared at him. But you don't even like me. I like what I had in my bed last night. I like what I'm holding right now. I like what I see. Will I like it forever? I don't know. But I like it right now. Can't you just agree with me and see where this goes? Eric, she whispered, I'm going to break his heart if he knows. He touched her cheek. Eric is your best friend. I'm not going to come between that. But he needs to know where you stand with him. He can't keep feeling the way he does for you. And if he keeps it up, I might just ask him to go away. I don't want to. But I don't like sharing. Rylee's eyes filled with tears. Oh my God, I'm so bad. Yeah, you are bad. In all the right places. I have to warn you, Rylee. I'm a very domineering person. I don't like it when another man tries to get in between me and my woman. So if Eric is going to try to take you away, I will have to take measures into my own hands. I need you to take care of him and keep him where he needs to be and not where he wishes he were. Rylee touched his cheek. I'm new at this. I have never done this with anyone. You're so experienced and you might hurt me. I don't want to be another Della. You're not Della, and you never will be. The drive to her house was long, it seemed, making her think about all the things she'd shoved aside. Theseus, last night, had been incredible. She wouldn't lie about that. It had been a single kiss that made her respond like rapid fire, and she was like an animal. But how to even begin describing what her heart felt was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. She just couldn't because she knew she had no words for it. But she loved the feeling of it. She did. She took a deep breath as the car came to a stop before her house. She saw Eric already there, as if he knew what time she was going to arrive, and Theseus turned to touch her hand. Do you need me to stay? He asked. She turned toward him and smiled. No, I think I need to do this alone. I'll call you later. How about I pick you up for dinner? He reached for her neck and pulled her down to kiss. The gesture made her heart spin a bit, and when she got out of the car, Theseus waved to her before driving off, and Eric came to yank her arm toward him. What the hell was that? He asked. She threw her arms to hug him. Eric, don't yell. Just listen. She felt tears enter her eyes. I did something last night. Something so sacred with another man, and I enjoyed it. But I don't want you to hate me for it. I'm scared even telling you this now because I'm afraid you'll go after him and beat him. She felt his heart beating fast against hers. I cherish you, Eric. I do. So, so much. And I don't want to lose you. I don't want to have to find another Eric to protect me. But what I feel for you is a deep and long love that I can never give to another man, not even Theseus. And he knows that. But what I feel for him is something I can never give to you. He pulled away, tears in his eyes. Is it the money? Is it the house he lives in? Shaking her head, she replied, This has nothing to do with money. I would choose him even if he lived in less than what he has. Lies, Eric cried as he shoved her away. I've been poor, Rylee, always. I've had to dig for coins just to feed my belly. But him? He's never known what it's like to suffer. And how do you know he hasn't? Because of where he stands today? Because of what he drives? Because of what his house looks like? What does it matter anyway? You chose him, a man who doesn't even know you. I know he told me he wanted me the moment he decided to have me. I know he doesn't hide anything he feels for me. I know he isn't willing to let me live in the dark of how he feels about me. But what about you? You've been there all along, and you never told me anything. You hid in the dark. I was afraid. Of what? Rylee cried. Of you rejecting me, like how you're doing it right now. Eric threw up his hands. I'm not a man who has all his ducks in a row. I don't know everything, but I know I want you. Then why wait until I wasn't yours to say it? Eric's face drained of color, and he sat on the ground. I don't know. It's not easy to tell you I want you. Maybe you don't want me enough. If you truly did want me, it wouldn't be this hard. He looked up at her. You've made your choice then. I have. He stood up. And it's him? It is. Eric nodded as he came to her and hugged her. How do I win you back? Rylee touched his shoulders and pushed him away. You never lost me, Erick, but you have lost yourself. I need you to help yourself, and you'll find the answer you need. He nodded and let her go. As he turned to walk down the path toward his house, Rylee looked up at the sky and shut her eyes. Love wasn't easy, was it? But if it were, we wouldn't fight this hard to keep what we find. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this story, The Domineering CEO. I will see you in the next episode.
We were crazy in love, careless and young, but I wouldn't change it. You had me right from the start, you gave me your all, but something changed, yeah. And I sometimes drive you crazy. But I need you. Yeah, I know, I sometimes drive you crazy. And I think that's why you've been building up this wall now. And I don't really know how I'm supposed to break it down. I tried peeking through the cracks.